Hi, this is Liam and Carl from PresentationExpressions.com, and today we're going to look at a presentation from TED.com, aren't we, Carl?
Yeah, and before we get started, I want to say that just before we did this recording, I was teasing Liam because he was bloody well screaming into the microphone, and it was really quite funny, actually. So, in any case, just wanted to share that with all of you. It was quite interesting. So, he's going to calm down now. He's going to get too excited.
I wish he hadn't shared that. But
yeah. Anyway, so as Liam said, we're going to talk about a presentation from TED.com. And what is the presentation all about?
Well, the presentation is really about the use of news in the media, of course, but what this gentleman is actually doing, he's going to show us how to use a story to tell facts and a big main idea, isn't he?
Right, exactly. So what we're going to do is we're going to pause the presentation at certain points and mention what he's going to say, and then also review what he says to talk about how effective it was, or just really actually praising what he's doing, because we think it was actually quite a good presentation. And we'll see that he's going to lead up to one big main point that he wants to share with everyone. So please pay attention, and we're going to get started with the presentation right now.
We are drowning in news. Reuters alone puts out 3.5 million news stories a year.
All right, so what did he do at the beginning? Did he introduce his name? Did he say anything about what he's going to actually even talk about?
Well, no, he didn't actually, Carl. He just got straight into the presentation. Now, of course, this is probably because he was introduced by someone, I'm guessing.
Right, most likely he was introduced, and even if people know that you're going to be speaking and they know something about you and maybe they've prepped the audience, then you can also do the same thing and just get straight into a fact or interesting thing to capture the audience's attention. Now, here he didn't ask a question. I thought he asked a question, but he actually just mentioned a big fact that maybe we're not aware of.
Right, and so this is a good technique to open up a presentation, and by doing this, of course, he got the audience's attention immediately.
Right.
That's just one source. My question is, how many of those stories are actually going to matter in the long run?
Now, what he just did there by asking that question was he's actually introducing his entire topic, right? He said that which one of those stories, he mentioned that there's, 6 million stories or whatever it was, but which one of those stories is going to matter in the long run? Now, that is the whole point of his presentation.
Right, and it's actually a very strong question as well when you think about it.
Right, so now what he's going to do is he's going to start giving examples using rhetorical questions to say, is this even important? Is this news story even important? And I want you to notice, or we want you to notice, what he's doing with the slides that he's using, all right? And also the questions as well.
Right.
That's the idea behind The Long News. It's a project by the Long Now Foundation, which was founded by TEDsters including Kevin Kelly and Stuart Brand. And what we're looking for is news stories that might still matter 50 or 100 or 10,000 years from now.
Right, actually he hasn't got to the questions yet, but what he's just done, though, is what? He's just introduced the entire presentation and the purpose of what he's trying to tell us.
Absolutely, and his we won't talk too much about the slides today, but his slides are very eye-catching and very visual, of course.
Right, exactly. And if you'll notice from this image here that we're freezing, you'll actually see that he's got a picture of, or it's like the video of his presentation below him like this. Now, obviously, this is a very high-end professional presentation, so we can see that he's using this, and there's a timer as well to help him with time. So very good kind of little technique there. The other thing also is, remember we talked about how if you're going to dim the lights and the lighting. So what is happening here, Liam?
That's right. We did talk about that in our last posting. And we can see here, you can see the audience.
Well, yes, you can see them, but it's also noticeable that the stage is much more brightly lit.
Exactly. That was one of your main points last time,
Exactly.
I think. We can see the speaker very clearly, and also you can't see it in this particular shot, but you can see the presentation very clearly also still.
Right, and I think here the reason why they're lighting the audience is maybe for him to be able to speak to the audience. Maybe that's kind of one of the TED things, is that, because even if it's too brightly lit, he can't even see the audience, right?
That's correct.
Right. Okay, anyway, let's carry on.
And when you look at the news through that filter, a lot falls by the wayside. If you take the top stories from the AP this last year, is this going to matter in a decade?
There he goes, right? So what did he just say?
Is this going to really matter in a decade? So
Right.
he's making a point here. Some news is less important than other news.
Right, and using that rhetorical question, right? He doesn't want you to answer it. He's just telling you with a question to state his fact, and is using a very clear picture to show exactly what he's going to talk about.
Right.
Or this? Or this? Really?
I thought Michael Jackson was important.
Is this going to matter in 50 or 100 years? Okay, that was kind of cool. But the top story of this past year was the economy, and I'm just betting that sooner or later this particular recession is going to be old news. So, what kind of stories might make a difference for the future?
Okay, so he just asked, what is actually going to be, going to make a bit difference for the future, or what kind of news stories are going to make a difference. Now here, he's going to start leading into why he's talking about this and what his main point is going to be. So again, he's going to show some more examples of news stories that are actually important that he wants to talk about.
Well, let's take science. Someday, little robots will go through our bloodstreams fixing things. That someday's already here if you're a mouse. Some recent stories: nanobees zap tumors with real bee venom. They're sending genes into the brain. A robot they built that can crawl through the human body.
Okay.
And actually, listen very carefully now, because he's actually going to refer to a previous presentation.
Right. He's going to mention something that was mentioned before, and you can see just from this, he's talking about different kind of news stories that could be interesting using an example from science. So talking about how different nano things, or whatever you call them, nano things. I'm pretty sure they're called nano things, aren't they?
He's actually referring to nano robots.
Okay, so
I believe.
okay,
Yes.
so they are kind of nano things, but they're just robots.
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, so the nano things. So the nano things. I'm going to invent a new thing here called nano things. Nano things are going to crawl through your body. Great. I mean, I'm already excited. So, but he's going to now mention this thing that Liam says, and really pay attention to what he's doing right now.
What about resources? How are we going to feed 9 billion people? We're having trouble feeding 6 billion today. As we heard yesterday, there's over 1 billion people hungry.
Right.
Now, because he's referred to a previous presentation, Carl, what does this do for his presentation?
It actually enhances the credibility of his presentation. So it might seem that it's actually the opposite, where he's saying, okay, well, the other presentation was actually better or something like that, but it's not. He's actually adding credibility because now his entire presentation has, you could say, authority from another source.
Exactly. So this is going to cause a lot of attention on his particular presentation, and people are probably going to remember it even more now.
Right. They'll see that there's actually some proof that what he's saying is actually true, because someone else already referred to this very fact that he's mentioning.
Right.
Britain will starve without genetically modified crops. Bill Gates, fortunately, has bet $1 billion on ag research. What about global politics? The world's going to be very different when and if China sets the agenda, and they may. They've overtaken the US as the world's biggest car market. They've overtaken Germany as the largest exporter. And they've started doing DNA tests on kids to choose their careers.
Right, so here he is, he's talking about different, maybe what he considers to be significant news items that could have a really long-lasting effect, rather than the things like, Michael Jackson dying, or Afghanistan, or whatever. I thought Michael Jackson dying was important. But it could be, these are stories that could have a longer impact on humans. So he's leading up to his point now again.
That's right. And, as you've already said, he's leading up to his point, and he's using what he believes are the bigger news stories now.
Right, exactly.
We're finding all kinds of ways to push back the limits of what we know. Some recent discoveries: there's an ant colony from Argentina that has now spread to every continent but Antarctica.
I think that's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
There's a self-directed robot scientist that's made a discovery. Soon, science may no longer
That's
need
Liam,
us.
by the way.
And life may no longer need us either. A microbe wakes up after 120,000 years. It seems that with or without us, life will go on.
Okay, so now we reach the point where it's actually almost the end of the presentation. So what's going to happen right now?
Well, as you've already mentioned, he's really leading up to his point here now. And this is the whole purpose of his presentation.
Right. He's mentioned facts and things that are significant that we didn't even think about that could have a large future impact. The ant colony being all over the world, that's spreading, and
Right.
what impact could that have in the future? The robot scientist that has already made a discovery. Maybe humans aren't even necessary anymore, he's saying. right? There's life that has woken up after 120,000 years. So these are really significant things that say that, hey, maybe we're not even necessary. So what is important for our legacy, right? So that's what he's going to get to now.
Well, my pick for the top long news story of this past year was this one: water found on the moon. It makes it a lot easier to put a colony up there. And if NASA doesn't do it, China might, or somebody in this room might write a big check. My point is this: in the long run, some news stories are more important than others.
Okay, that was it. I mean, all he had to say was some news stories might be more important than others, but that was his big whole point, right? To say, okay, building it up, and saying what we think is maybe significant might not be significant, really in the long run.
Right, I mean, a really great presentation, both visually and the way he presented, as well as with rhetorical questions and so on. But I think what's really good here is he gave a very powerful presentation. He made his point in such a short time too.
Right, and I think for you, if you're going to take something away from this and use this kind of style, is to think about that. How can you, first of all, engage your audience by maybe using different questions and leading up to a big point by stating things in a small way, what is maybe the opposite of what you want to say, and then giving evidence of how your point is important.
Absolutely. And I think that's all we've got to say today, Carl.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next time.